way to reconcile the growing demand for plastics with the advent of the circular economy is EPR, or Extended Producer Responsibility. At least that's what Manuel Asali thinks. Manuel is the Vice President of Nexant, which is an energy and chemical advisory working in the petrochemical industry. And today we shall be connecting with him to talk about EPR and finding out who is responsible. Let's talk about it. Hello Manuel, good to see you. Thank you for joining me. I would like to speak about the concept of Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR. And in particular today, I would like to talk to you about whose responsibility EPR really is. So, who is responsible?
Very good. Thank you, Michael. It's great to be here. This is one of the key questions in the whole concept of EPR or product stewardship. As you know, I mean, if we look at the value chain in a very broad sense, you start with the raw materials, the polymer manufacturers, the brand owners or the OEMs, and then eventually the customers. And then there's an end of life point where you gather the waste and you decide what to do with that waste. That's in the very traditional linear model. So this is the key question in EPR. If the whole point of EPR is to shift the responsibility of that waste or that end product in the life cycle upstream, who is the one who takes that responsibility? It could be the OEM, it could be the polymer producer. And there's no clear-cut answer so far on this, Michael, and I would like us to explore the different angles of it.
Okay, well maybe we can begin with, you mentioned the current system is a linear one, moving to more of a circular one. At present, whose responsibility is the waste streams, the flows coming from there at the moment? Let's begin there.
That's a good way to do it. Well, basically, what's happening today is that we have given all of that responsibility to the waste management companies or the municipalities who are taking that waste. And as we know, a lot of that waste ends up in probably in landfills. I see.
So, and what's the EPR concept suggesting to us now? If we're going to be moving away from the essentially the government's looking after our waste management, how is it going to change with the implementation of EPR?
Correct. So in a way, again, very broadly, the idea of EPR is almost as though you are privatizing the waste management. But I want to be clear about this. I'm not suggesting that suddenly polymer manufacturers or even brand owners are going to suddenly find themselves receiving all this waste or this all this stream of waste coming back to them, and they have to figure out what to do. No, we have to be a lot smarter than that, and actually people are being quite smart because there's also a lot of other waste or a lot of other value that can be extracted out of that waste. So we need to slice these things slowly. And let me give you an example, Michael. I mean, there's one way in which you can do EPR as a producer of polymers, and it could be in if you like, in a sort of a voluntary private scheme. That would mean, for example, somebody who makes plastic bottles and has an agreement with a retailer, who then has an agreement with customers to bring back the bottles, and then you have a relatively closed loop that can be managed privately. Now, that's a straightforward way to do it. But when you're making a car, for example, with all the different plastic parts in a car, it's much more tricky to see exactly how you're going to bring those polymers back to be able to reuse them. So we need to start with the waste.
So, okay, so then I see that this, at the moment, you mentioned the word voluntary. I mean, how do you see this currently and how do you see this in the future? Will such schemes, where we're now we're beginning to realize the value in what we previously termed as waste. We now know that there's value in the molecules that these materials are made from. The producers recognize that value. And there are new incentives to reuse a lot of these materials. So correct. Do you see this being a voluntary system, or are we looking at mandatory the enforcement by legislation? What's happening now, and where's it going to go in the future?
Correct. No, legislation is still not. I mean, it's not broad and it's not very specific in terms of the the requirements for EPR. And as you probably know, Michael, but one of the issues with legislation and probably the things that worry some of the producers is that we don't producers hate when legislation is very inconsistent or it changes frequently or it's very different between one region and another. For example, what the European Union has been saying is that we need to increase the level of recycling, and there's a clear target to recycle 50% of the polymers by 2025, and that's fine. But it doesn't really say how that has to be done. And in a way, they talk about EPR, but they still say we need to grow the EPR. But it's still implying that it's going to be a voluntary or a private endeavor.
Okay, so we understand the why. The why is because we need to go into the circular economy. We need to be much more efficient with our use of materials. We have to understand there's value in waste, and that value should be reused again for efficiency purposes. That's the why. So, and there's going to be some sort of collaborative work between legislatives, government bodies, and private industry into doing the operations required to get that circular momentum achieved in EPR. Then the big question is how, right? As I understand correctly. So so the how's about I presume, the implementation of new technologies that's going to innovate in the recycling world. But also I'm thinking about that there must be huge space for opportunity. If there's companies who are they're used to producing a certain material or a certain product, and now all of a sudden they're being encouraged and getting incentives to reuse a lot of material streams.
Yes.
Do they have the expertise and capability to do that, or is there a new opportunity here?
Absolutely, yes. Well, that's the key point, because manufacturers of polymers, we don't have any expertise on managing the waste. So what we see is that groups of companies are getting together and they're creating these things that are called PROs, which is producer responsibility organizations.
PROs, okay. Can you say?
And the idea of these organizations is precisely to try to help bridge that gap between what's happening at the point of waste and to try to make those products easier to bring back into the into the loop.
And in terms of innovation of new technologies, what to do with waste, how do you see that? Do you think the petrochemical industry is improving all the time in new innovative ways to recycle waste, to get that follow that product life cycle all the way to the end, and then try to renew the potential that the molecules still have? Do you see that innovation happening? Is it a hotbed of activity, or do you think there needs to be a better promotion of new technologies and a more aggressive implementation of new technologies?
Yes, no, definitely. Some of the companies are already doing hard work on this, from the in the entire spectrum, from the mechanical recycling side to the raw material or the energy recycling side. Let me say like this, Michael. I think it's a good way to think about it. We need to make waste management more professional. And I'm not suggesting that it's, some companies may be already quite professional, but the point I'm trying to make is, if you look at how they are dealing with waste in places like Japan or in some pockets in Europe, out of a single stream of waste, they get products that become remanufactured, and then they make compost, and they produce pellets that can be recycled, and they make biogas, and they make, they eventually make slag that can be mixed with concrete and cement, right? That all came, and the amount of product that they landfill is very small. So this is what I mean by becoming a little bit more professional from that point. Now, as chemical companies, what can we do? Well, if we can get a good stream of recycled material that we can incorporate into our products, that's already been done. Or you may even find alternative feedstocks that you could feed into your crackers to produce polymers. And so you're making virgin polymers, but you're using recycled raw material.
Oh, fantastic. And so maybe in conclusion then, would you agree that in the question of whose responsibility is EPR, it sounds from what you're telling me that it's very much a collective thing, that we need to work a lot better together, whether it be producer companies, whether it's the consumer, and the levels of education so they know how to work effectively with the recycling of waste, and that we need new PRO companies that can lift the recycling of waste to a higher professional level, and then we need effective government and legislation. Is that a fair reflection on the discussion?
Yes. And if I may just add, because I'm glad you brought it, it's the whole idea of the customers or the end users also becoming more educated about what to do with the waste, which we know is also part of the problem. So I'm glad you brought that into the picture too.
Okay. Well, Manuel, thank you very much, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye-bye.